before her younger brother ever came to visit, before the broken trust that would shatter what little strength she had left, there was another story. A love that wasn't truly love. A performance. Her name was Ada Ora, 27 years old, a marketing executive in Lagos who had learned to carry herself with quiet confidence. His name was Chaik, 31, an entrepreneur with a silver tongue, a well-cut wardrobe, and the kind of easy smile that made you feel chosen the moment he looked at you. They first crossed paths on a rainy evening in the heart of the city. Ada Ora was stepping out of a small cafe in Victoria Island, clutching a file against her chest to shield it from the drizzle. The humid wind carried the faint smell of coffee and wet asphalt. Her hair, loosened by the damp air, clung to her face in soft strands. Under the shade of a nearby shop's awning stood Chaik, phone in hand, head bowed like he was reading something important. But in truth, he had been watching her from the moment she appeared through the cafe's glass door. When their eyes met briefly, he didn't waste a second. "Excuse me," he said with a playful tilt of his head, "but I think the rain is jealous. You're stealing all the attention out here." His voice was warm, smooth, just enough charm to make her smile despite herself. She should have kept walking, but something in his delivery disarmed her. They talked briefly, and before she knew it, she had given him her number. Their early days were intoxicating. Casual outings at cozy lounges in Lekki, midnight calls that stretched until the line crackled with silence, and stolen moments in the back of his car after dinner dates. Ada Ora liked him, his confidence, his ambition, the way he looked her in the eyes when he spoke, like she was the only person who mattered in that moment. But from the very beginning, she had been firm about one thing. "I'm not ready to start a family now," she told him one evening over suya at a roadside stand. "We have to be careful. Always use protection." Chaik nodded easily. In those early weeks, he didn't argue. He would reach for a condom without hesitation, sometimes even joking, "Your wish is my command, Madam Executive." He made it seem like there was no rush, like he respected her boundaries completely. And Ada Ora believed him. But months later, something shifted. One humid night, after they had been out drinking with friends, he pulled her close in his living room, his breath warm against her ear. "It's not sweet with condoms," he murmured. "It's not the same. Let's just enjoy it naturally. Trust me." She pulled back, frowning. "You know why we can't do that, Chaik?" He chuckled softly, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "I'll control myself. Nothing will happen." The first time they did it without protection, it was entirely his idea. He kissed her deeply, voice low and persuasive against her lips. "Just this once. I'll be careful." At first, she resisted, but the warmth of his hands, the steady rhythm of his touch, and the trust she thought she had in him chipped away at her resolve. To her surprise, she enjoyed it more than she expected. There was a closeness, a rawness to it, that made her heart pound differently. But beneath that new thrill was a small knot of unease, a reminder of every conversation where she'd said she wasn't ready. It didn't stay a just once thing. Every time, she told herself she'd insist on a condom next time. Every time she didn't, it was a slow surrender, one where pleasure outweighed caution. And Chaik never complained. One night, in his Lekki apartment with the ceiling fan whirring lazily above them, Ada Ora lay in his arms, the air still thick with the warmth of their bodies. Her mind wouldn't rest. She turned to him. "Chaik, what if I get pregnant?" He didn't even blink. Instead, he met her eyes with a half-smile. "That won't be a problem. I'm not planning it, but if it happens, it'll just make things faster for us. I'll take responsibility." The way he said it, smooth, confident, slid into her like honey, coating her fears just enough to make them quiet. She still felt a flicker of doubt, but his assurance was a blanket she wrapped around herself. She didn't know yet that some promises are only made to keep the moment sweet, not the future safe. Ada Ora had always loved the way Chaik touched her. Not just his hands, but the deliberate patience behind them. The way his fingers lingered like they were memorizing her skin. The way his palm traced slow, lazy circles on her back. His kisses felt like they could stop time. In those moments, all her earlier rules about protection dissolved. She wasn't thinking about consequences. She was thinking about how he made her feel wanted, how his attention felt like sunlight on a cold morning. Weeks blurred into months. She stopped tracking her cycle. He certainly wasn't paying attention. When she missed her period the first month, she told herself it was stress from work. When the second month passed, unease grew in her chest. One Saturday morning, while Chaik was out with his friends, Adaora walked to a small pharmacy in Surlir. The shop smelled faintly of antiseptic and dust. She bought a pregnancy test and returned to her apartment, locking the bathroom door behind her. Her hands trembled as she waited. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. Her knees weakened. She slid to the cold floor tiles, staring at the test like it might change if she looked away. Chaik's words came rushing back. If it happens, I'll take responsibility. But would he still mean it now that if had become reality? She kept the news to herself for 2 days. In that time, she watched him closely. How he laughed easily over dinner. How he made weekend plans. How his gaze never lingered on her long enough to notice the quiet shift in her mood. She rehearsed the conversation in her head. Would she tell him while they were cooking? Or in bed? Or over a quiet dinner? Each scenario ended differently, some with relief, some with anger, some with him walking away. But no matter how she imagined it, she knew the truth. Once she spoke the words, nothing would ever be the same. It was a Tuesday morning in his apartment. Weak sunlight filtered through half-closed curtains. Chaik was buttoning his crisp white shirt, his watch already on the table beside him. Adaora stood in the doorway, clutching the pregnancy test in her hand. Chaik, I need to tell you something. He glanced up, distracted. I'm pregnant. The air seemed to still. His hand froze mid-button. His eyes searched her face as if waiting for her to laugh and say it was a joke. She didn't. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost calm. But the accusation inside it was sharp. How could you let this happen, Adaora? She blinked. Let it happen? Chaik, I told you so many times I was tired of taking post pills. They were messing up my cycle. You knew that. But he didn't let her finish. He shook his head, grabbed his watch, and walked past her. The slam of the door was heavier than any insult. That evening, she waited for him in the living room. The TV on but her thoughts far away. When he returned, he didn't greet her. Didn't ask if she'd eaten. Didn't look at her. He walked straight to the bedroom, showered, and went to bed without a word. From that day, something in him shut down. The warmth in his voice vanished. His touches stopped. The man who once couldn't go a day without making her laugh now treated her like a stranger. Just another tenant in his space. And Adaora, sitting alone at night with the sound of the ceiling fan filling the silence, finally understood. The man who had promised to take responsibility couldn't even take a conversation. 2 days passed in suffocating silence. Chaik moved around the apartment as if she were invisible. No good mornings. No are you okay, no fleeting touches in the hallway. It was as though the man who once held her face in his hands and promised forever had been replaced by a stranger who couldn't even meet her eyes. On the 3rd day, late in the afternoon, he finally spoke. Adaora was sitting on the edge of the couch, scrolling aimlessly through her phone without really seeing the screen. Her mind was a fog of dread and unanswered questions. She heard his footsteps cross the tiled floor and felt him stop in front of her. When he spoke, his voice was flat, businesslike, as if they were negotiating a bill. Adaora, you need to do an abortion. Her head jerked up, phone slipping from her fingers. What? Chaik didn't flinch. I'm not ready for this. Her mouth fell open. Chaik, you told me you were ready. He cut her off with a small shake of his head, like she was a child refusing to listen. That time I was expecting some money. I thought things would be different by now. But the money didn't come the way I planned. I'm not in the position to raise a child. Not now. His words landed like stones in her chest, each one pressing the air out of her lungs. She stared at him, searching for any flicker of hesitation. Some crack in his armor that might let her believe he was only speaking out of fear. But his eyes were cold, his tone measured, as though he had thought this through and decided she was the one who had to adjust. Her voice trembled. I can't do an abortion. I can't. This is my child too. Chaik's jaw tightened. His reply was ice. Then you have two options. Do it and stay with me, or refuse and leave. Adora's breath caught. A knot of fear coiled in her stomach. Not just fear of being alone, but of raising a child without a safety net, without the man she had once believed was her partner. But the thought of ending the life inside her felt like a betrayal she could never live with. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding. Then I'll leave. That night, she lay in bed beside him, tears soaking her pillow. Chaik slept with his back to her, his breathing deep and even, as if nothing had been said. He didn't touch her. He didn't turn toward her. He didn't even notice the way her body shook with quiet sobs. By morning, she had made her choice. Before the sun had fully risen, Aora packed her things. She moved quietly, the wheels of her small suitcase humming against the tiled floor. A part of her hoped, against all logic, that he would stop her, ask her to stay, or at least look up. But Chaik sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone without lifting his head. She walked to the door, pulled it open, and stepped out. The sound of her suitcase rolling down the hallway echoed like a final goodbye. He never called, never texted, never checked if she made it to her destination safely. In that silence, she understood. Chaik hadn't just abandoned her. He had abandoned their child before it even took its first breath. Surreal. When Aora arrived at her friend Amaka's apartment, her eyes were swollen and her shoulders slumped under the weight of what had just happened. She barely had time to drop her bag before Amaka shut the door and wrapped her in a hug. Ada, what happened? Why are you here with your bag? Aora sank into the couch and began to speak. Slowly at first, then faster, as though holding the words in had been choking her for days. She told Amaka everything. How Chaik's warmth had turned to ice, how he demanded an abortion, how she refused, and how he let her walk out without a fight. Amaka's hand flew to her mouth. That's wickedness, Ada. Pure wickedness. Let me call him right now. She snatched up her phone and dialed his number. It didn't even ring, straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same thing. Her frown deepened. Switching to her second phone, she tried once more, but this time the line didn't connect at all. Try with your phone, Amaka urged. Aora took her own phone, dialed, and her heart sank when the same message appeared. Number busy. Chaik had blocked her. Blocked them both. Just like that, he had slammed the door shut. The days blurred into weeks. Amaka's home became Adora's safe harbor. She helped with errands, kept her company, and shielded her from the loneliness that tried to creep in at night. But as Adora's belly began to swell, she knew she couldn't stay on her friend's couch forever. She began searching for a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just somewhere safe enough to raise a baby. She didn't tell her family. Not her mother, not her father, not even her cousins. She already knew the verdict they would pass. That she had shamed herself, been careless, ruined her future. The thought of their disappointment was a weight she couldn't add to the heartbreak she was already carrying. So she smiled on phone calls home, pretending everything was fine, claiming work was keeping her busy in Lagos. In reality, she was going to hospital appointments, saving every naira she could, and sketching out a plan for life as a single mother. At night, in the quiet of her new apartment, she would sit by the window, one hand on her belly, and whisper, "It's just you and me now, but I promise I won't fail you." The birth. When labor pains came, it was Amaka who rushed her to the hospital. Amaka who held her hand through every contraction. Amaka who wiped the sweat from her face and reminded her to breathe. When the baby's first cry rang through the room, Adora's tears flowed freely. She held her daughter close, inhaling the sweet, warm scent of new life, her heart swelling with fierce love. For the first 3 months, Amaka was her rock. Feeding the baby at night, cooking when Aora was too exhausted, rocking the tiny girl to sleep when colic made her cry for hours. But one morning, Amaka sat beside her and spoke gently. "Ada, you know I love you, and I'll always be here, but I have to go back to work next week. I can't be around all the time anymore." Edaora nodded. She understood. Amaka had given more than anyone could ask. But it still hit her. She was about to be truly, completely on her own. The call to her mother. That night, she picked up her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed her mother's number. "Mummy, I have something to tell you. I had a baby 3 months ago." The silence on the line was deafening. Then came a sharp gasp. "You what?" "Edaora. You mean to tell me you were pregnant and you never said a word until now?" Her throat tightened. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. But please, Mummy, I need you now." Her mother's voice softened slightly, though hurt lingered beneath it. "You should have told me from the start. I don't even know how to feel right now. Please, Mummy, just come first. I'll tell you everything when you get here." There was a pause. Then her mother sighed. "Edaora, I just stocked the shop with new goods a few days ago. If I leave now, they'll spoil and I'll lose everything. Let me sell them for about a month. Then I'll come. I promise." Edaora ended the call with mixed emotions. Relief that her secret was finally out. But the ache of knowing help was still weeks away. That night, holding her baby close, she whispered, "Just one more month, my love. One more month, and Grandma will be here." A solution. A few days later, Edaora sat in her living room, gently rocking her daughter as the wall clock ticked toward midnight. The thought of returning to work in a few weeks gnawed at her. The idea of leaving her baby with a stranger made her chest tighten. Then she thought of her younger brother, Chisholm, 17 years old, fresh out of WEC exams, and free until further notice. He had always been gentle with children, able to make even the fussiest baby smile. She called him immediately. "Chisholm, it's Ada." "Ah, big sis, how are you doing?" His voice was bright, warm. She took a breath. "I need your help. Mummy can't come yet, and I'll be resuming work soon. I need someone I can trust to stay with the baby until she arrives. Can you come to Lagos for a while?" There wasn't even a pause. "Of course, sis. Just tell me when, and I'll be there." Relief spread through her chest like warmth. She gave him the details, and he promised to pack that very night and take the first available bus. For the first time in months, Edaora felt a small flicker of hope. When Edaora ended the call with her younger brother, she sat still for a moment, phone in hand, feeling a strange lightness spread through her chest. The knot of tension that had been living in her shoulders for weeks seemed to loosen, as though someone had finally lifted a bag of cement from her back. For the first time in what felt like forever, her smile was not something she had to force. She knew, of course, that caring for a newborn was no small task, especially for a teenage boy who had never so much as babysat a neighbor's child before. But there had been something in Chisholm's voice during their conversation, an eagerness, a kind of boyish excitement, that planted a fragile seed of hope in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. That night, while she fed her daughter in the warm dimness of the bedroom, Edaora leaned her cheek against the baby's soft hair and whispered, "Your uncle is coming to meet you, my love. We're going to be fine." The baby suckled contentedly, her tiny fingers curling and uncurling, and Edaora let herself believe the words. Before she went to bed, Edaora transferred Chisholm the transport fare. Barely 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed repeatedly. He had sent a flurry of voice notes, each one more animated than the last. "Thank you, sis. You don't know how much this means. I'll leave early in the morning so I can reach before noon." His laughter rang through the messages, genuine and infectious. And true to his word, at the first blush of morning light, Chisholm boarded the earliest bus out of their hometown. By 11 a.m., Edaora's phone vibrated with a short message. "I don't reach Lagos." Quickly, she strapped Kayamika into her stroller. The Lagos heat pressed down on her, the kind that made the air shimmer, but she hardly noticed. It had been years since she last saw her brother. When she spotted him across the parking area, tall and lanky in a black hoodie that looked far too warm for the weather, she felt a burst of affection. He spotted her too and broke into a grin, jogging towards her. "Big sis," he called, hugging her with just enough care not to bump the stroller. Adaora bent down and gently lifted her daughter so he could see her better. Chisholm, meet your niece, Kayamika. He crouched, his long limbs folding awkwardly, and peered into the stroller. His voice softened in awe. She's so tiny, and so beautiful. His hand reached forward, tentative, to brush her little fingers. They walked home together, talking about his recent school exams, the antics of his friends back in the village, and the changes in their hometown since she had last visited. Chisholm carried his small travel bag, swinging it lightly with the careless energy of youth. When they reached the apartment, he placed his bag in a corner, his eyes immediately locking onto the Wi-Fi router sitting on the shelf. His face lit up like someone who had stumbled upon buried treasure. Wait, you mean I have unlimited internet here? He asked, his voice full of mischief. Adaora laughed. Yes, but don't think you came here just to be pressing phone. You're here to help me. No wa'ala, he replied quickly, already pulling out his phone. I'll help you and still enjoy this network. That evening, after they'd eaten dinner, Chisholm sat cross-legged on the couch, holding Kayamika in the crook of his arm while watching videos on his phone. Every so often, he would pause to make funny faces at her or gently rock her. From the kitchen doorway, Adaora watched them, a quiet smile spreading across her face. For the first time since giving birth, she didn't feel so completely alone. The first 3 days after his arrival were a crash course in newborn care. On the very first morning, Adaora sat him down with Kayamika in her arm. Chisholm, watch closely. Always hold her head like this. Support her neck. Babies are delicate, she instructed. He nodded seriously, mimicking her hand position until she was satisfied. Next came feeding lessons. She demonstrated how to prepare formula, checking the water temperature with a drop on her wrist, shaking the bottle gently, and holding it at just the right angle so Kayamika wouldn't swallow too much air. Chisholm leaned forward, absorbing every detail. By the third day, he could feed her on his own, humming tunelessly as she drank. See you, Uncle of the Year, Adaora teased one afternoon, catching him swaying side to side while holding the bottle. Lagos life suited Chisholm far more than the village. Steady electricity for most of the day, a clean and tidy apartment, and, of course, his favorite perk, unlimited internet. He made video calls to friends to show off his new job, sometimes balancing Kayamika in one arm while grinning into the camera. Late at night, when Adaora and the baby were asleep, he would binge-watch football highlights or comedy skits, his laughter echoing softly through the sitting room. Yet, to Adaora's pleasant surprise, he never completely neglected his duties. If Kayamika cried, he would pause his videos, scoop her up, and rock her gently until she calmed down. She found herself, more than once, watching him from the kitchen. Her tall, awkward teenage brother holding her baby with the tenderness of a seasoned parent, and feeling an unexpected wash of relief. By the end of the first week, Adaora felt ready to attempt her first day back at work. Early Monday morning, she laid out the baby's feeding and sleeping schedule in detail, walking Chisholm through each step. No pressing your phone while feeding her, she added, raising an eyebrow. He grinned sheepishly. Yes, madam. That day went better than she could have hoped. When she returned in the evening, she found the dishes washed, the apartment neat, and Kayamika sleeping peacefully in her crib. Chisholm looked up from the couch with a satisfied smile. I told you she's safe with me, he said. The next morning followed the same smooth rhythm: feeding, diaper changes, playtime. By mid-morning, Chisholm had settled on the couch with his phone while Kayamika napped. Scrolling through Facebook, a post from a friend caught his eye. The caption had a string of laughing emojis and a must-watch tag. Curiosity tugged at him, and he tapped it without much thought. At first, he wasn't sure what he was seeing. But within seconds, the nature of the video became clear. His eyes widened, yet he didn't look away. When it ended, he kept scrolling, clicking similar links. He had heard of such videos before, hushed conversations among friends at school, whispered jokes after class, but this was his first time actually seeing them. A strange heat spread through him, the kind of restlessness he didn't know how to name. Each video seemed to pull him deeper, feeding a curiosity that had been sleeping quietly all his life but now was fully awake. By the time Kayamika began to stir in her crib, Chisholm had watched several more clips, each one leaving him with an unfamiliar, unsettling energy. He quickly locked his phone and stood up, his heartbeat still a little faster than usual, as he went to tend to her. An idea came to him. He saw how the guys always put their fingers in the lady's vaginal before the intercourse. He wanted to give it a try to know how it feels like. He has never seen the real thing apart from that of Kayamika. He wanted to try it with Kayamika. He has changed her diaper severely, so he is aware that it's the little version. So he stared at her. Her eyes were wide opened. He took off her diaper. Innocent Kayamika eyes were calm and helpless. Then, he opened her tiny legs wide. He saw the little hole. He took his time to examine it. His heart was beating faster. He was aroused. Then he tried to insert his pinky finger in her vaginal. It didn't go inside first. He had to apply some lubricant so it can pass through. Immediately his fingers were inside. He saw her bleeding. Kayamika started crying because it was painful. He quickly removed it, wiped the blood, and tried calming her down by putting food in her mouth. Deep down he wanted to do more. He was cross-checking her vaginal from time to check if it was bleeding. He saw just blood spotting. Then she slept. That evening, Adaora returned home to find Chisholm seated on the couch with Kayamika in his lap, bouncing her gently and making silly faces until she squealed with laughter. The sound was like balm to Adaora's tired spirit. She dropped her bag by the door and leaned on the wall for a moment, watching them. "You're doing so well, Chisholm," she said warmly, walking over. "I don't know how I'd manage without you." Chisholm grinned, rocking Kayamika side to side. "I told you, big sis. No need to worry when I'm here." Adaora smiled and went into the bedroom to change out of her work clothes. Her muscles ached from the long day, but knowing her daughter had been safe made it easier. After slipping into a loose dress, she went into the nursery to check Kayamika's diaper before bedtime. She hummed softly, a little tune she always sang during changes. "Mama's here, my baby," she whispered, keeping her voice light. Kayamika cooed and kicked her tiny legs as Adaora undid the straps of the diaper. But when she opened it, she froze for a moment. Amid the normal mess, there was something that caught her eye. A faint smear of red, small dots mixed in with the stool. Her brows knitted together. She gently lifted the baby's legs higher for a closer look. Kayamika's expression was calm, not crying or showing any signs of discomfort, which made Adaora wonder if it was really something to worry about. Maybe it's just from straining," she murmured under her breath. She had read somewhere that babies could sometimes have tiny streaks of blood if they were constipated or had a little tear from passing a hard stool. That explanation seemed reasonable enough. She studied her daughter for a moment longer, not realizing that she was looking in the wrong place entirely. To her, the thought that it could be anything else didn't even cross her mind. Sighing softly, she shook her head. "You'll be fine, my love." She reached for the wipes, cleaned Kayamika with extra care, and applied a thin layer of baby cream before securing a fresh diaper. The baby gurgled happily, waving her hands as though the little ritual was just another game. Satisfied, Adaora lifted her daughter into her arms and returned to the living room. Chisholm was there, slouched comfortably with his phone, earbuds in. He looked up briefly when she walked in. "She's fine," Adaora said with a smile, gently bouncing Kayamika in her arms. "Thanks again for taking care of her today." "Any time," Chisholm replied casually, eyes flicking back to his screen. Adaora sat beside him, unaware that a faint ripple had passed through the calm surface of their days. To her, it was just another ordinary evening, routine, predictable, safe. But somewhere, beneath that normal rhythm, something small and troubling had begun to take root. The next day, Adaora left early for work, as usual, leaving Chisholm in charge. Not long after she left, Chisholm settled on the couch with his phone. The house was quiet, except for the soft cooing of Kayamika in her crib. He found new set of pornographic videos the day before, and his curiosity pulled him deeper. He pressed play, his attention focused on the screen. After watching for a few minutes, he really wanted to put it into action with little Kayamika. He wasn't concerned if she was a child, he just wanted to give it a try and see how it's like. His friends were always talking about it. As usual, he removed her diaper, opened her legs wide. He could see the cut from the last time in the inside. But he wasn't concerned. He applied lubricants around his penis and tried to penetrate. It didn't go in at first. Kayamika was awake, watching him, about crying. Then he decided to force it in. She burst into tears. She was loud, bleeding. He quickly covered her mouth but continued stroking. He never knew he covered her nose too, so she couldn't breathe in the process. He kept on doing it. She was struggling to breathe and in pain. Few seconds later, the room was silent. Chisholm continued. When he finally reached orgasm, he discovered Kayamika wasn't moving. Tears all over her face. Eyes opened, still. Kayamika? Chisholm's voice came out in a thin, trembling whisper as he bent over the tiny figure on the bed. Her eyes were half open, glassy and unfocused, staring at nothing. She didn't move. A wave of panic hit him so suddenly it was like ice flooding his veins. No, 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 please get up, get up. His voice cracked as he shook her lightly, but her body felt heavy, limp, like a doll that had been left too long in the cold. Kayamika, please. His voice rose now, desperation breaking through, but there was no answer. His hands began to shake so violently he could barely keep hold of her. The phone he had been holding slipped from his grip, clattering onto the tiled floor beside them with a dull thud. The video on the screen was still playing silently, its glow casting a pale light across the room, like an unfeeling witness. And in that moment, standing there, shaking, with the weight of her tiny body in his arms, Chisholm realized what had happened. Curiosity, foolish, selfish curiosity, had caused this, and now nothing could undo it. His mind became a storm, thoughts spinning and smashing into each other so fast he couldn't grab hold of any of them. His breathing grew loud, ragged, uneven. What will I do? What will I tell Edaora? The words stumbled out of his mouth, barely more than a whisper. His eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for something, anything, that could fix this. But all he saw was the evidence of what he had done. The air felt heavy, suffocating, pressing in on him. He wanted to cry, to scream, but his throat was clamped shut by terror. Then, through the blur of panic, his gaze caught on the backyard door. In the far corner of the yard stood the old deep freezer. Edaora had stopped using it years ago. It had been unplugged for so long that dust had built up along the edges, and the metal was dull and cold to the touch. To Chisholm, in that frenzied state, it wasn't just an old appliance. It was a hiding place. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he stepped outside, clutching Kayamika's lifeless body to his chest, as if afraid the wind would snatch her away. Every shadow felt like it was watching him. When he reached the freezer, he pulled at the handle. The lid gave a stiff creak, opening slowly, and a faint metallic smell, dry, stale, and cold, drifted into the night air. His hands hesitated over the opening. For a moment, his mind screamed at him to stop. But fear was stronger than reason. With trembling fingers, he lowered her inside, arranging her carefully, almost tenderly, as though she were just sleeping. But her skin was cool beneath his touch, and the stillness of her tiny chest made his stomach twist in on itself. The sight nearly broke him. He slammed the lid shut as if to block it from his mind. He stumbled back into the house, breathing hard, yanking off his blood-stained shirt and trousers. He stuffed them into a plastic bag, his movements frantic, almost mechanical. His skin prickled with sweat even though the air felt cold. Within minutes, he had thrown on clean clothes, grabbed his phone, and slipped quietly out the front door. No note.
No explanation.
Just silence in his place. To Chisholm, running felt like the only thing left, easier than facing the hurricane that would hit when Edaora came home. That evening, Edaora returned with a small, satisfied smile, balancing a nylon bag in each hand. Inside were fresh packs of diapers, powdered milk, and a few food items she thought Chisholm would enjoy. She was tired from work, but comforted by the thought that her daughter was safe at home. "Chisholm, I'm back," she called cheerfully, kicking the door shut behind her. Silence. She frowned lightly, thinking he might be in the bedroom, rocking Kayamika to sleep. She walked in, her smile fading when she saw the bed empty. The baby's blanket lay rumpled exactly where she had left it in the morning. "Chisholm?" she called again, her tone sharper now. "Where are you?" Still no reply. Her chest tightened. She dropped the bags onto the floor and moved toward the kitchen, her eyes scanning corners, checking the high chair, glancing at the playmat, empty. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw something on the tiled floor. A small smear, dark, red. She froze. Bending down slowly, she touched it with her fingertip. It was slightly sticky, fresh enough to still cling to her skin. Blood. Her breathing became shallow, almost gasping. She followed the smear across the kitchen floor toward the back door. Step after step, her heartbeat pounded harder, each footfall heavy with dread. The trail ended at the deep freezer in the far corner of the yard. Her hands began to shake violently. "No, no, no," she whispered, barely able to speak. She grabbed the handle, pulling with trembling strength. The lid opened with a groan, and then she saw her, Kayamika, lying motionless, eyes half closed, her skin pale, her tiny dress stained with dried blood near her head. Adaora's scream ripped through the air, raw and broken, a sound that seemed to tear from the deepest part of her soul. She collapsed to her knees, clutching the edge of the freezer for support as tears blurred her vision. Her body shook so violently she could barely keep herself upright. Her mind rejected the scene in front of her. She had just kissed that tiny forehead that morning, had heard her giggle, had left her safe. And now she was staring at the impossible. The quiet of the evening was gone. The air was heavy with grief, and Adaora's world had shattered in one brutal moment. Adaora's screams tore through the compound like a blade, high and raw, cutting through the lazy hum of the afternoon. It was the kind of sound that made your blood run cold, the kind that forced you to drop whatever you were doing and run. Within seconds, doors banged open. Neighbors poured out into the open yard, women with wrappers hastily tied over their chests, men still clutching half-filled cups of Gary, children peeking nervously from behind their mother's skirts. They followed the sound until they saw her. She was in the center of the compound, her knees planted in the dusty ground, clutching the limp body of little Kayamika against her chest. Her face was contorted with grief, her tears mingling with the dust clinging to her cheeks. She rocked back and forth, whispering words only she could hear. One woman, a plump neighbor from the flat next door, covered her mouth with both hands. "Oh my God, Adaora, what happened?" she gasped, her voice trembling. A man in his 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped forward slowly, his eyes drawn to the tiny dress soaked in blood. He froze, his lips moving soundlessly before the words escaped. The air grew heavy, thick with disbelief. Someone near the gate found their voice and shouted, "Call the police! Call them now!" The urgency in his tone jolted the yard into motion. 15 minutes later, the piercing wail of a siren cut through the stillness. A battered police van swung into the compound, tires screeching. 3 officers stepped out, 2 men and a woman, each one already scanning the scene. The female officer approached Adaora cautiously, crouching so their eyes met. Her voice was low, steady, and heavy with practiced sympathy. "Madam, we're so sorry, but we need you to tell us what happened here." Adaora's lips quivered. Her words stumbled out, broken by gasps for air. I don't know. I swear I don't know. I left her this morning with my younger brother, Chisholm. He's only 17. My maternity leave. It's almost over. I had to go to work." Her voice cracked into a sob, her whole body shaking. "I came back and... She couldn't finish. The older officer exchanged a grim look with his partner. "Where's your brother now?" "I don't know," Adaora whispered, shaking her head so hard it was almost violent. "He's gone. I searched everywhere. I don't know where he is." The female officer took a deep breath, her voice softer now. "Madam, I have to be honest with you. From what we're seeing here, it's possible your daughter was assaulted before she died." Adaora's eyes widened. Her grip around Kayamika tightened as though she could shield her from the truth, as though her warmth could undo what had been done. The ground beneath her seemed to tilt. The younger male officer cleared his throat. "Do you have any recent photos of your brother?" With trembling fingers, Adaora fumbled for her phone. She scrolled quickly and handed it to them. They saved the images, sending them instantly to their station's database. A few minutes later, an officer stepped forward gently. "Madam, we need to take her to the morgue." "No," Adaora's voice cracked, but the word came out too faint to stop them. Her arms resisted, but her strength was gone. The baby was lifted from her grasp with care, wrapped in a white cloth. Adaora collapsed into a plastic chair a neighbor had brought out, her head bowed, lips moving in a prayer that dissolved into sobs. The compound was silent except for murmured whispers, the scrape of shoes, and the fading sound of the police van carrying her baby away. The search began immediately. Officers moved from door to door, questioning each neighbor. One woman said she heard footsteps in the backyard late in the afternoon but thought nothing of it. Another swore she saw Chisholm walking quickly toward the main road with a small nylon bag. "Was he with anyone?" An officer pressed. "No, just him. And he looked nervous," she replied, frowning at the memory. By then, Chisholm was already gone. He didn't go far that first night. Fear kept him from wandering openly, and the thought of boarding a bus made his palms sweat. He found an abandoned mechanic workshop at the outskirts of town, a place that smelled of rust, burnt oil, and forgotten years. Old tires leaned drunkenly against cracked walls. Broken engine parts littered the floor. He curled into a corner, the cold concrete pressing into his skin. Sleep was impossible. Mosquitoes found every patch of exposed flesh, their high-pitched whine filling his ears. He scratched until his skin burned, but the real itch was inside his chest, a gnawing panic that would not let go. By dawn, hunger gnawed at him too. He decided to risk visiting a classmate who lived a few streets away. But when the door opened, it wasn't his friend. It was the boy's elder brother. "What do you want?" the man asked, eyes narrowing. Chisholm's voice was shaky. I need a place to stay. Just for a while." The man shook his head.
No.
"We don't have space. My parents won't allow it." The rejection stung. Chisholm mumbled a hollow "okay" and turned away. At the bus park, he checked his account just enough for a single trip. He boarded a rickety bus heading toward his village. But he didn't dare return home. Instead, he slipped toward the far edge of the community, where fewer people knew his face. Ibuka's house was shaded by a wide mango tree. The boy was lounging on a wooden bench when Chisholm appeared. "Chisholm, guy, you just show like this." Ibuka grinned. Chisholm forced a weak smile. Just small problem with my boss in the city. Needed to clear my head." Ibuka didn't fully believe him, but he didn't push. His mother, busy over a pot of palm oil stew, welcomed Chisholm politely. "You can stay for now," she said finally. "We don't have much, but we'll share." That night, Chisholm lay on a thin mattress in the corner of Ibuka's room. It was the first roof over his head in days, but even there, sleep wouldn't come. Every blink brought Adaora's face, the baby's body, the cold white of the freezer. In the city, Adaora's nights were no better. Her eyes were red and swollen, her voice a husk from crying. The walls of her apartment felt like they were pressing in. Ngozi arrived one evening, handbag dropped carelessly on the couch, arms wrapping Adaora in a fierce hug. "Ada, please, you have to rest," she whispered. Adaora shook her head. "I just want to see him. I want to ask him why she was just a baby. Ngozi, my baby." Ngozi held her tighter. "The police will find him. You'll get your answers." But Adaora wasn't sure any answer could mend what had been shattered. That night, she called her mother, her voice breaking. "Mama." Chisholm killed Kayamika." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "What are you saying?" "Chisholm hasn't been home. I don't understand." Adaora explained between sobs, the freezer, the blood, the emptiness. Her mother began to wail on the other end. I swear to you, Ada, he is not here. If he was, I'd drag him to the police myself. Days turned to weeks. Weeks bled into months. Still nothing. The police printed hundreds of posters bearing Chisholm's face. A boyish look, eyes that seemed too young to hold such darkness. They plastered them on bus stops, market walls, church gates, even in the family's village. In the village, whispers followed his picture. Some claimed sightings. Others swore they hadn't seen him at all. None of the leads led anywhere. Edaora could not bring herself to bury Kayamika. Each time she visited the morgue, she stood frozen, staring at the cold stillness, telling herself the same thing. I will not put her in the ground while he is still free. Her voice was heavy with steel when she said it to Ngozi one evening. He needs to look me in the eye and answer for what he did. Ngozi could only hold her. Some grief had no cure, only the hope that justice would come. It was a blistering hot afternoon in the village, the kind where the sun seemed determined to bake every surface it touched. The red dust from the untarred road swirled lazily in the air as Ibuka's mother returned from the market, balancing a woven basket of vegetables on her head. Sweat glistened on her brow, and her wrapper was slightly damp at the back from the long walk. She slowed her steps near the main junction, stopping to greet Mom Nkechi, who was fanning herself in front of her kiosk. They exchanged a few pleasantries about the heat and the rising price of palm oil. But just as Ibuka's mother turned to leave, something caught her eye. A piece of paper, nailed crookedly to the wooden wall of the kiosk. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped closer. The poster was printed on cheap paper, the ink slightly smudged from the humidity. But the image was unmistakable. The face staring back at her was one she knew far too well, Chisholm. Her heart skipped. In bold, angry red letters across the top were the words, "Wanted." Beneath them, the accusations, rape and death of a 3-month-old infant. She felt her knees weaken instantly. The basket wobbled dangerously on her head before she caught it with her hands. "Jesus Christ of Nazareth," she breathed, almost in a whisper, though the shock made her voice tremble. Her mind flashed back to just weeks ago. Chisholm arriving at their home with a small bag slung over his shoulder, telling Ibuka he had a little problem with his boss in the city. He had smiled, calm, respectful, as he greeted her. Nothing in his tone, his posture, or his words had suggested anything close to the horror written on that poster. She could feel the blood drain from her face. Without even saying goodbye to Mom Nkechi, she turned and began the walk home, her feet heavy but her heart pounding in her ears. When she pushed open the wooden door of the house, she dropped the basket of vegetables onto the small table in the corridor, her hands shaking. "Ibuka!" she called, her voice sharper than usual. He appeared from the backyard, a small hoe in his hand, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mama, what is it?" She thrust the crumpled poster toward him. "Do you know this is all over the village? Your friend is a wanted criminal. They say he did something unspeakable to his own sister's child and killed her. And you told me he only had problems with his boss." Ibuka's brow furrowed as his eyes scanned the paper. Slowly, his face hardened. He turned sharply toward the corner of the room where Chisholm sat, leaning back on a stool, scrolling through his phone like a man without a care in the world. "Chisholm?" Ibuka said quietly, the tension in his voice making the air feel heavier. "Is this true?" The sound of his name made Chisholm's head lift. His hands trembled slightly as he put the phone down on the stool beside him. His lips parted, but for a moment no words came. Then, in a choked, broken tone, he muttered, I didn't mean for it to happen. It wasn't my fault." Ibuka stared at him in disbelief. "Wasn't your fault? Do you hear yourself? You stayed here, eating my mother's food, sleeping under our roof, while police were looking for you everywhere." Chisholm's eyes welled with tears, his breathing uneven. "I swear, Ibuka, it just happened." Before Ibuka could respond, the sound of firm, heavy footsteps filled the compound. Voices, deep, commanding, echoed outside. A loud knock rattled the wooden door. "Chisholm Okafor," an authoritative voice barked. "Come out with your hands up." Ibuka and his mother exchanged a glance. Chisholm's face went pale. His shoulders sagged as if his strength had drained away. Without a word, he rose slowly to his feet. He didn't try to run. When the door swung open, 2 armed officers stepped inside. One quickly cuffed Chisholm's hands behind his back while the other read his name aloud, confirming their target. Ibuka and his mother stood frozen, watching silently as the young man they had sheltered was led out like a criminal in chains. Dust swirled behind them as the officers marched him toward the waiting vehicle. That same evening, Chisholm was transferred from the village police station to the city headquarters, the very place where Adaora had been waiting, for months, to hear that he had finally been found. At exactly 6:47 p.m., Adaora's phone rang. She almost didn't pick up. Her dinner of plain rice sat half-eaten in front of her, her appetite long gone. But the caller ID made her heart jolt. Police headquarters. She swallowed hard and answered. "Hello, Miss Adaora?" The voice was deep, official. "Yes, this is Inspector Joseph. We have Chisholm in custody." For a moment, Adaora felt as if the world had gone silent. You have him?" "Yes, ma'am. He was apprehended in a village in Anambra State and brought back to the city this afternoon. You can come tomorrow morning if you wish to see him." She barely remembered ending the call. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to close her eyes. Memories flooded her. Kayamika's tiny fingers curling around hers, the way her baby had smiled in her sleep, the soft, rhythmic sound of her breathing. And then, uninvited, came the image of Chisholm's face, the younger brother she had trusted without hesitation. By 7 a.m. the next day, Adaora was standing at the reception desk of the police station. The officer on duty led her through a narrow corridor. The walls were damp, the air heavy with the smell of sweat and old concrete. When she stepped into the small holding room, she saw him. Chisholm sat hunched on a wooden bench, wrists cuffed, head bowed. His once tidy hair was a tangled mess, his clothes wrinkled. He looked up. The moment his eyes met hers, his lips trembled. Tears slid down his cheeks. "Ada!" His voice cracked.
I'm sorry.
"Please, it wasn't my fault." Her chest ached with a mixture of rage and grief. "Not your fault? She was 3 months old. Chisholm, I trusted you with her. I didn't mean to hurt her," he whispered, his voice almost lost in the stale air. "I don't know what came over me. I swear." She turned away sharply, unable to bear the sight of him. The officer tapped his watch. Time was up. 2 policemen came in and led Chisholm out. His figure disappeared down the dim hallway, swallowed by the shadows of the cell block. The inspector beside her spoke softly. "We'll keep him here until his arraignment. The court will decide his fate." Adaora nodded without a word. Her eyes were cold now. Justice was close. She would not let it slip. 2 weeks later, the police station bustled with activity when an older couple arrived. Chisholm's parents. Their clothes were travel-worn, their feet dusty from the journey. When they saw him in the visitation area, his mother gripped the bars, her voice breaking. "Chisholm, my son, why would you do this to your own blood?" Chisholm's eyes were red and swollen. "Mama, it wasn't my fault. Please, tell Adaora I'm sorry." His father's voice was like stone. "Do you know the shame you've brought on this family?" Chisholm only muttered, "I'm sorry," over and over until their time was up. Outside, his parents went straight to Adaora's house. When she opened the door and saw them, her face hardened. "My daughter," his mother began, tears flowing freely. "Please," Chisholm said he's sorry. "He told me to tell you." Adaora's voice trembled, but it was sharp. "If you had come when I called you, Mama, all these things would not have happened. I begged you to come help me. I trusted him because you didn't come. And now my daughter is gone." Her father's tired eyes met hers. "We can't change what happened, Adaora. It wasn't intentional. We can only pray for strength." Adaora turned away, her voice low and unyielding. "I am not ready to forgive." The day of the court hearing, the courtroom overflowed with people. Journalists, neighbors, strangers. Adaora sat in the front row, her face unreadable. When Chisholm was led in, shackled and in a faded prison uniform, he kept his gaze on the floor. The judge's voice was steady as the charges were read: rape and manslaughter of a minor. The evidence was overwhelming. Chisholm's lawyer pleaded for leniency, reminding the court that Chisholm was only 17 at the time. The judge gave his verdict: 25 years in prison, sentenced to begin on his 18th birthday. Until then, juvenile detention. A quiet murmur swept through the crowd. Chisholm's shoulders slumped. Adaora stood and walked out. She did not look back. The next day, under a gray sky that threatened rain, Adaora buried her daughter. The tiny white coffin looked too small to hold a life. When the first handful of earth hit the lid, something inside her broke completely. Justice, she realized, might exist on paper, but it could never bring Kayamika back. When Chisholm turned 18, his world changed in a way he had dreaded for months. Juvenile detention was harsh, but there had still been a thin thread of safety, a line between boys and men that the guards tried, at least on the surface, to maintain. That line vanished the day they transferred him to the main prison. The air there was different, heavier, clinging to his skin like humidity before a storm. It was a mixture of sweat, unwashed clothes, dust, and something sharper, something metallic that made his stomach knot. Every clang of the gates echoed like a warning. As the guards led him through the cell block, he could feel the stairs, sharp, deliberate, crawling over him. Word had already gotten around. In a place where rumors traveled faster than the guards' boots, he was already branded. And in prison, crimes against children were an unforgivable stain. They didn't see him as just another inmate. He was a child killer, and that label was more dangerous than any knife. The first night, after the lights went out, the silence lasted only a few minutes. Then the shadows shifted. A rough hand clamped over his mouth from behind, cutting off his breath. Pain exploded in his ribs as a fist drove into him, followed by another into his jaw. His body jerked and twisted under the blows, but there was nowhere to run, no guard to shout for. Boots slammed into his side, knuckles pounded his back. Someone shoved a rag into his mouth to stifle the sounds. By the time they stopped, he was sprawled on the cold concrete, gasping, blood dripping from his nose and the corner of his mouth. His ribs ached with every shallow breath. No one looked at him when the lights came back on. He couldn't even tell who had done it. They had melted back into their bunks, their faces blank, as though nothing had happened. That night, lying on the thin, stained mattress, pain throbbed through his body. But it was not just the bruises that kept him awake. When he finally drifted toward sleep, she came. Kayamika. She stood in the far corner of his cell, the dim light casting shadows over her small frame. Her hands were balled into fists, her cheeks wet with tears. Her lips trembled, but it was her eyes, wide, accusing, that pierced him like a knife. The sound of her crying filled the space, high and thin, impossible to block out. He jerked awake, heart pounding, sweat clinging to his skin. But it didn't stop. Every night after that, she came. Sometimes calling his name, sometimes standing in silence, just watching him with that same look of hurt and betrayal. Days later, miles away, Adaora was also losing sleep. It had been a week since they had laid Kayamika to rest, a week of hollow mornings and nights spent staring into the dark. She had told herself she would never see Chisholm again, that she had said all there was to say. But something inside her gnawed at her. Anger, grief, the need for one last confrontation. When she arrived at the prison gates, the place felt suffocating. The air was hot, thick, and smelled faintly of disinfectant and metal. Every step toward that building felt like walking into an open wound. When they brought Chisholm out, she barely recognized him. His face was thinner, his skin pale under the harsh lights. His eyes darted nervously around the room before settling on her. "I buried her with your pictures," she said, her voice low but steady. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles had turned white. His eyes widened. His lips trembled. I see her every night," he stammered. "She cries, Adaora. She stands there. I can't sleep. Please, I'm sorry. It wasn't my fault, Before he could finish, Adaora rose from her seat. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound slicing between them. She stared at him one last time, her voice carrying a venom that cut deeper than a blade. Thank you for killing my daughter, she said. That's all I came to tell you. She turned and walked away before he could form another word. She didn't look back, didn't slow her pace until she was outside the prison gates, where the sun hit her face but couldn't warm her. For Chisholm, her words burned. They were heavier than fists, sharper than boots. They stuck to him like a brand, permanent, searing, impossible to wash away. Weeks later, his mother came to visit. She carried a small food flask and a cooler bag, her hands trembling as she waited for the guards to let her through. The moment she saw him, her heart clenched. His cheeks were hollow, his collarbones sharp beneath the thin prison shirt. His once bright eyes were now shadowed with fear and something that looked like shame. Chisholm, she whispered, her voice breaking as she set the food on the table. What happened to you? Why do you look like this? He tried to smile but couldn't hold her gaze. Mama, please, help me beg Adaora, he said, his voice raw. Tell her I am sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. Every night, she calls me. I wake up shaking. I can't breathe. I can't escape her voice. His mother's tears slipped silently down her cheeks as she squeezed his hands. You have brought shame to us, she said softly. But you are still my son. I will speak to her. But I cannot promise she will forgive. When the visit ended, he carried the food back to his cell, but the hunger was gone. That night, Kayamika came again. And the night after that. Her small voice followed him even when he was awake. Meanwhile, across the city, his mother stood at Adaora's door. She lingered for a long time before knocking, her handbag clutched to her chest. When Adaora opened the door, her expression was polite but distant, her eyes tired. My daughter, the older woman began, her tone trembling. I know I have no right to be here, but Chisholm asked me to beg you. He regrets everything. He says he is sorry. Adaora's eyes softened for a brief moment, but she held herself steady. Mama, I'm not ready now, she said quietly. Maybe one day I can forgive, but right now I just want to heal. Please, give me that. The woman nodded slowly. I understand. I only pray peace will find you. Then she walked away, her figure shrinking into the quiet street. Years passed. Adaora buried herself in work. She avoided family gatherings, weddings, anywhere people might ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. Love, for her, was a door she had locked long ago. It wasn't until her closest friend dragged her to a birthday party one humid Saturday that something shifted. The music was loud, the smell of grilled meat and perfume mingling in the air. Adaora sat in the corner, nursing a drink, content to be invisible. Then he walked in. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, but there was something about him, calm, self-assured, with a smile that felt genuine. Their eyes met for only a second, but it was enough to stir something small, something she thought she had buried for good. His name was Kalechi. They exchanged numbers that night. When she got home, his message was waiting. It was nice meeting you, Adaora. She stared at it for a long time before replying, you too. In the weeks that followed, their conversations grew, from polite greetings to long exchanges that stretched past midnight. Kalechi's friends weren't encouraging. Guy, leave her, one told him. Her past. It's too much. She won't let you in. But Kalechi wasn't deterred. The more he learned about her, the more he admired her resilience. Adaora was cautious. She didn't tell him everything at once. But he didn't push. When she was quiet, he let the silence sit comfortably between them. When she needed company, he was there. Eventually, she began to laugh again. She found herself waiting for his calls. One rainy evening, she told him everything. Chisholm, Kayamika, the pain, the years of loneliness. When she finished, his voice was soft. You've been carrying this too long. Let me carry some of it with you. It was still months before she agreed to date him, not because she was healed, but because she finally felt safe. One afternoon at a cafe, she decided to be clear. "Kalechi," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup, "I won't have sex outside marriage. If you're serious about me, you'll have to marry me first. When that day comes, I'll be completely yours." There was no hesitation in his answer. "Adeora, I'm not here to rush you. I want you, not just your body. If marriage is the path, then that's the path. I'll wait." Her chest tightened with relief and a flicker of hope she thought she'd lost forever. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, someone could see her pain and still choose her completely. Adeora had fallen for Kalechi in a way she didn't think was possible anymore. It wasn't a sudden infatuation. It was a slow, steady warmth that had crept into her life and stayed there. She visited him often, showing her love in the way she knew best, through food. On sunny afternoons, she would arrive at his apartment carrying bowls of her spicy jollof rice, its rich aroma filling the space before she even stepped inside. On rainy days, she brought steaming pepper soup, the scent of lemongrass and yuziza leaves wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. And every Sunday she made his favorite, coconut rice with tender chicken and fried plantain, served the way he liked with just a hint of extra pepper. Sometimes, after dinner, they would put on slow music, old soul records, or soft highlife tunes. They danced together in the dim light of his sitting room, her head resting against his shoulder, his arms holding her as though he never wanted to let go. They kissed, yes, gentle, lingering kisses, but they never went further. Kalechi never pushed. He seemed content simply being close to her, savoring the trust that was growing between them. After a year of dating, Kalechi began to plan something Adeora never saw coming. A proposal. He wanted it to be quiet, intimate, and perfect. On the chosen night, candles flickered across his small dining table, casting golden light over a vase of her favorite flowers, pink hibiscus and white lilies. The smell of grilled fish and fried yam filled the air. They had just finished eating when he rose from his chair, walked around the table, and went down on one knee. Adeora froze, a fork still in her hand. "Kalechi, are you serious?" she whispered, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "More serious than I've ever been in my life," he said, his voice steady, his eyes holding hers. Adeora's mind was a blur. She had imagined they might date for a few more years before even talking about marriage. But as she looked into his eyes, something in her chest loosened. Her heart knew the answer before her mind could argue. "Yes," she breathed, her eyes glistening with tears. That night, back at his apartment, the air between them felt different, softer, warmer, but with an undercurrent of something new. After a while, Adeora excused herself and disappeared into the bedroom. When she returned, she was wearing a loose silk dress, the fabric flowing over her curves, catching the light with every movement. She walked slowly to where he sat in the living room. "Kalechi," she said softly, "come to me. I want you." His eyes widened. "Adeora, you said no sex until the wedding. I promised to respect that." She smiled faintly, kneeling in front of him, her fingers brushing against his cheek. "And you did. That's how I know your love is real. You've waited for me, respected me, and now I'm ready." Before he could respond, she kissed him. Slow at first, then deeper, pulling him toward her. The silk dress slipped from her shoulders as she guided him to the bedroom. What followed was a night of tenderness and hunger, of laughter and quiet whispers in the dark. For the first time, they shared themselves completely. Lying in his arms afterward, Adeora felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. The next morning, she woke before the sun. The room was dim, the air cool. Kalechi was still fast asleep, his breathing deep and even. She slipped quietly out of bed, took a quick shower, and dressed. In the kitchen, she fried plantain and eggs, made a cup of hot tea, and set it all neatly on the dining table. She didn't leave a note. She didn't say where she was going. Adeora's heart pounded as she boarded the bus to the prison. It had been nearly 5 years since the incident. 5 years since she had seen Chisholm face to face. She had promised herself not to keep him updated on her life. That had been part of her healing plan. But blood, no matter how stained, was still blood. When Chisholm was brought out, she almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner, his skin pale, his eyes dull under the harsh fluorescent light. His once proud shoulders seemed to slope under an invisible weight. "I heard you were here, why?" His voice cracked, and he avoided her gaze. Edaora swallowed hard. "I came to tell you, I'm getting married."
I'm engaged.
He froze. His lips trembled, but no sound came out. Finally, he looked down. "That's good. I hope he loves you better than I ever treated you as a brother." Her throat tightened. She wanted to be cold, to turn and walk away, but something in her chest ached. "Chisholm, I'm not here to forgive you, but I wanted you to know that life moved on. And you're still my brother." He nodded, eyes wet, but said nothing more. When she got home, Kelechi was sitting in the living room, eating the now-cold breakfast she'd made. He looked up. "Where did you go?" "To the prison," she said, sitting beside him. "To see Chisholm." He didn't frown or question her decision. Instead, he nodded. "Take your time. If someday you can forgive him, do it for yourself. It's already in the past." His calm acceptance sank deep into her heart. Weeks later, one quiet evening, they sat together with calendars spread out, choosing a wedding date. They found one that felt perfect, close enough to keep the excitement alive, far enough to prepare. But before the wedding bells could ring, Edaora began to notice changes. Her body heavier, her appetite strange. One morning, she sat in the bathroom, staring at the test in her hand. 2 bold lines. "Pregnant." Memories from the past flickered, but there was no fear this time. Kelechi wasn't like the man who had once abandoned her. When she told him, his face lit up. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her forehead. "This is the best news I've ever heard. I'm going to love both of you with everything I have." She called her parents that same day. "Start preparing the bride price list," she told her mother. "Kelechi is ready." The wedding was a dream. Her father walked her down the aisle, tears in his eyes. Her mother's smile stretched so wide it looked like it might split her face. They had feared she would never trust love again. Yet here she was, radiant in white. They danced, laughed, and for the first time in years, Edaora felt truly free. Less than a year later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The moment Kelechi placed her in Edaora's arms, her breath caught. The tiny face was a mirror image of Kayamika's. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they were mixed with gratitude. They named her Chioma. She grew fast, tiny feet pattering through the house, giggles echoing in every room. Kelechi adored her, coming home with small toys or mangoes just to see her smile. On the surface, Edaora had everything she had ever dreamed of: love, a family, peace. But deep inside, there was still an unhealed wound. Chisholm. One Saturday morning, she told Kelechi, "I want to see my brother." He searched her eyes for hesitation. There was none. "We'll go together," he said. They took Chioma along. She was too young to understand where they were going, playing with her doll in the back seat. When Chisholm was brought out, he froze. His eyes moved from Edaora to Kelechi, then to the little girl holding Edaora's dress. "Chisholm," Edaora began, her voice steady, "you took something from me that I can never get back. For years I hated you, but I've learned that hatred doesn't heal, it only weighs you down. Today, right here, in front of my husband and my daughter, I forgive you. Not because it was small, but because I refuse to let it define my life. You are still my brother, and I will wait for the day you walk out of here." Chisholm's shoulders shook, tears falling silently. He couldn't speak, only nod. 8 years of his sentence were gone. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, hope stepped into his cell. That night, Chisholm lay in his bunk staring at the cracked ceiling. For the first time since he was locked up, he didn't hear Kayamika's cries in his dreams. No haunting voices, just Edaora's words, "I forgive you." It was as if a heavy chain had been cut from his chest. He closed his eyes and slept peacefully, deep, unbroken, warm. At home, Edaora also slept like a baby. Kelechi woke twice to check on her. surprised by the calmness on her face, as though years of tension had finally melted away. In the morning, he kissed her forehead. "You look free," he whispered. She smiled, and he knew the forgiveness was as much for herself as it was for her brother. From then on, she visited Chisholm more often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Kelechi and Chioma. They talked, laughed a little, and slowly rebuilt what remained of their sibling bond. She didn't excuse what he did, but she took him back as her brother. And in that acceptance, they both began to heal in ways prison walls could never stop. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share, and subscribe for more amazing stories.